One. Welcome to the masterclass. Today, I think we have our esteemed guest, Sipho Sipeng, right? He'll be taking us through the human-centered in business analysis. But first things first, I'd like to obviously give him a warm welcome. Thank you for joining us, Sipho. I'll just take you guys through the house rules, right? If we can move to the next slide. Yeah. Okay, cool. So please, I think point one is that please stay on mute unless cleared to talk. Switch off your video. Only the presenters are allowed to present in the video mode. And then the presentation will be 90 minutes long. You may post your questions in the main chat. We will read them when it is time for Q&A. Presentations. The presentations will be uploaded uploaded on the IIBSA YouTube page found on the link there. We'll share the link on the chat as well. And unfortunately, we do not send out the presentation deck. And to become a member of the IIBA South Africa, you can go to the link that is displayed on the screen. We will also share this link on the chat. And for our next event, you can visit IIBA South Africa event page. And the link is also on the page that is displayed. And then we'll also share this on the chat. And if you'd like to present a tool or technique, or you'd like to present on this masterclass forum to the community, you can then please contact us on devon@southafrica.iiba.org. Thank you everyone for joining us, and do enjoy the presentation today by Sipho. But before we start, right, I will hand over shortly to our facilitator, Deborah. But before we start, we wanted to find out from the audience, right? So I'll be launching a poll here. Please do advise by thumbs up if you can see it. So it's basically saying who wants to transition into product owner role. So if I can get audience to vote yes, no, I'll give it. I think I'm not getting any more votes. So I'll end the poll. I think it's 50-50 by the looks of things. I think people are still voting. If you haven't voted, please vote. If you can't, please just advise on the chat, right? Okay. I think that's it. We can then end the poll. Then I'll just, I think I've shared the results. And then the second one, I've just launched it just now, is that who has worked or is currently working with customer experience and user experience designers in the same project team. Please vote if you haven't voted. We'll just give it a 1 minute as well, right? Thank you for your votes. I think I'll just end this. You see that the percentage is fire on the people that haven't worked with UX and UI guys. Okay, that's it then. So with this data, I think Sipho, when he's going through his deck, he will try and to basically answer some of the questions that we've posed here. Maybe it will interest you to work with UX UI guys in terms of what they do on what Sipho will be presenting. And then without further ado, I'll hand over to my colleague, Deborah, who will be facilitating the session. Deborah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Zeki, and a very warm welcome to everyone. We thank you for joining us, and we hope that you find value for this session today. We would just like to share with you Sipho's background, just so you know what you're in for today. We already know that it's going to be a very valuable session, and we can't wait to delve into it. Sipho is a multifaceted professional with expertise in human-centered design, process engineering, and marketing. He is an innovator, speaker, and social entrepreneur who fosters creative confidence in others for personal and business growth. With a background spanning over 2 decades, he has occupied diverse roles in sales, marketing, process engineering, customer experience, and service design. Sipho has been recognized with innovation awards and hold an MBA on the integration of design thinking into business process improvement. He values experiential diversity, believing it fuels unconventional thinking, enabling him to lead teams into uncharted territories. He encapsulates his value creation in the acronym DEC: Design, Engineering, and Commerce. Tonight, we're going to be hinging on Sipho's diverse roles and experience across different industries. And we're just going to be welcoming him to lead us to see the goal, the value when business analysts collaborate with design team, and what value can we gain from the collaboration. Sipho, we thank you for joining us tonight. And we're very, very confident that you're going to take us through a journey that is going to blow our mind and just open up our minds to possibilities that we never knew exist. Please, everyone, join me to welcome Sipho Sepeng.
Thank you very much, Deborah. All right. Welcome everyone. Lovely to have you here with us. My name is Sipho Sepeng, and without further ado, let me share my presentation. Okay, just please let me know when you guys can see it.
Yes, we can see it now, Sipho.
All right, great stuff. Sure, those stats were quite a revelation. So 56% of you guys have at least been exposed to design, have worked with practitioners on a project, and 56% of you also want to transition into a PO role. And so today we'll be looking at human-centered design in terms of business analysis and how we could explore the magic at the intersection of design and business analysis. So thank you once again, Deborah and Zeki, as well as everyone on the call for joining me. We appreciate and sharing valuable time with us. So the content of the presentation today will go as follows. I'll chat a bit about myself, which Deborah has already done so comprehensively. We'll look into business analysis, just to revisit the definition, the process, look at some core concepts, as well as do the same for design thinking, so we can try to identify already any points of convergence So the talk will focus on trying to engender harmony and minimize predilections for thinking, similarly the process, as well as some of the mindsets that drive design thinking. I'll give you a case study on some of the projects that I've worked on with business analysts as well. And so it was quite encouraging just leading up to this session today that, you know, we had people like Ruth Gray who posted on LinkedIn, and I looked at her description there. Her role said that she's also a product designer as well as a business analysis. So it seems that there already is this convergence of roles, which is quite encouraging. I've worked as well with Dumelo Lefatula. I saw he also commented on there, who's also a senior CX designer as well as a business analyst. So design is not a new concept to most business analysts. After the case study, I will then look at the intersection at where we can find magic between the two. Let me also mention Ian Henry, who's an agilist and a safe trainer. All of these disciplines are quite critical for us in looking for an intersectional and integrated framework where we could really work in harmony in doing great work. So a bit about myself, Deborah has already provided a comprehensive overview of that, but I wanted to just point you guys to the quote there to the right that says, happiness or progress, as I've added there, lies in the joy of achievement and the thrill of creative effort. This quote I have probably had for the longest time as my WhatsApp description, and I reflected on it again just this week building up to this talk. I thought it could be because of maybe old age that I haven't changed it, but in preparation of this session, as I reflected upon it, I got to think and reflect on my skills and educational background. As you would see in the education segment there, I've started in music. And so I've always been on a chase for creative exploration and exploits. I then went on into marketing, then went on to do my business studies, went on to do customer experience as well as Lean Six Sigma, and I even did a business analysis bootcamp. And the roles, therefore, that I have occupied span an array of industries from performance arts to sales and marketing, and to the point that I find myself now in customer experience and service design. All right, some of you might have seen on my LinkedIn post that I will be bringing a blast from the past where a colleague of yours, and pretty much a colleague of mine in the industry as well, who's also an EXCO member of the IIBA South Africa chapter, where we conducted a workshop on design thinking for business analysis in 2018 at the BA Summit, South Africa. And so let's find out who that may be, or all right, not as yet. So it's up to you now just to guess who that may just be. And so let's just define some of the terms in business analysis before the great reveal later on. And so going into business analysis, the BABOK version 3 defines it as a practice of enabling change in an enterprise by defining needs and recommending solutions that deliver value to stakeholders. And this is in the BABOK version 3 as well. So the theme of articulating needs and designing solutions that could meet those needs and deliver value to stakeholders is coming out quite strongly at the core of this definition. Let's define some of these themes that are coming out in this definition by looking at the business analysis core concept model. You will see there that at the top, you have changes, and the changes refer to the act of transformation in response to a need. The definition also made reference to solutions, and solutions are a specific way of satisfying one or more needs in a context. It made reference as well to needs, which is either a problem or an opportunity to be addressed. It also refers to stakeholders, and that is the group of individuals with relationship to the change or the need itself. And value as well is in that same definition, and that is the worth, importance, or usefulness of something to a stakeholder within a context. And so what is context? So context might be the only concept that we might have missed in that definition, but it refers to the circumstances that influence or are influenced by and provide understanding of the change. And so it's quite critical to understand this in that context. As you will see with the design thinking model, behaviors, beliefs, competitors, culture, demographics, all of these are some of the attributes of what we would call needs. The SDLC process is just a generic process for design thinking. Now that we've looked at the definition of business analysis and the mindsets thereof that govern the practice, let us look at how this is applied in a process. So the SDLC is a process that defines the various stages involved in the development of software for delivering a high quality product. SDLC stages cover the complete life cycle of a software, that is from inception to retirement of the product. The purpose of the SDLC is to therefore deliver a high quality product which is as per the customer's requirement. So the note to yourself that maybe you should make at this point as we try to make these connections between the two practices is just to first look at what we refer to when we speak of needs and the customer in the context of the SDLC model. Is it the needs of the end user or the needs of our business stakeholders? Because in the designer's mind, it would beg the question who the customer is. I read an article by Panda, who further stipulates that the order of the phases as requirement gathering, designing, coding, testing, and maintenance, it is important to adhere to the phases to provide the product in a systematic manner. That's an operative word as well to just make note of, that it's quite systematic and methodical in its approach. We'll see when we get to the design thinking side, how that plays out. So who defines the requirements? As you'll see in the design thinking process, it is an iterative process and somewhat exploratory. In analysis, a business analysis and project manager, as part of the requirements gathering process, they will meet with the customer, that would be the business stakeholder, to gather the requirements on what the customer wants to build. Who will be the end user and what is the purpose of the product that they will establish in their interaction with the business owner. Once requirements gathering is done, an analysis is then done to check for feasibility of the product and the development therefore. We will see how that applies in the design phase and where we can find that magic at the intersection. You have a design phase also as part of the SDLC process. And in the design phase, the requirement gathering in the software requirement specification document is used as an input and software architecture that is used for implementing system development. So we need to take note as well at this point how design is defined in terms of this SDLC process. Next, we'll look at some delivery mindsets. And so BARBOK incorporates values and principles of the Agile Manifesto, which are based on a humanistic view of product development as a process founded in communication and collaboration. I think once we get to this point and bringing human back into business is where we can already start seeing alignment to the design process, as design is inherently a human-centered process that looks to solve human problems. So the mindset 6 in this point on continuous improvement ensures that we continue to be consistent in how we deliver value continually. And so on to the design thinking process. So Tim Brown, who was CEO of IDEO, the global design and innovation company, defined design thinking as a method of meeting human needs in a technologically feasible and strategically viable way. His aim was really to help global companies innovate. And frankly, it was pretty much his life purpose, and it still is now as co-chair of IDEO. He looked to democratize design and make it accessible to pretty much everyone because he understood the value of design to business. For the mere fact that he believes that as a methodology, it could help solve wicked problems faced by businesses and accelerate innovation. This is not so much about aesthetics, as some of us may think, or how beautiful things look. But it's a process of getting to such an outcome underpinned by design mindsets. To that end, this book consists of almost no visuals. He further defines design thinking as a human-centered and collaborative approach to using design mindset to solve complex problems. So let's explore further how the design thinking is structured and how this compares to the SDLC process as well. So taking from the definition, we'll look now at this human-centered design diagram. So in the definition, he made reference to human needs, technological feasibility, as well as viability as well. Looking at this definition and breaking it down in a form of this Venn diagram, we can see how the human, because of wicked problems, are inherently human. As Steve Jobs once said, to start first with the customer experience and work it back to what the technology. And so this will always be the starting phase and point for design thinking. And so that is captured in the desirability circle of the Venn diagram. And desirability just basically refers to what makes sense to people and for people. Moving on to viability. which is what is likely to become part of a sustainable business model, it looks pretty much at what the business why and purpose is, and if they would be able to meet those needs that they've identified in that group and segment of customers that they would have empathized with. It is critical for a business to match its capabilities to those that they have identified in the market for it to be able to deliver those in a way that is effective and impactful. And especially in the day and times we find ourselves in today, where sustainability, social impact, purpose, and all of those good values are top of mind, not only within business, but are also top of mind on the balance sheet. And so feasibility then looks at what is functionally possible within the foreseeable future. Team adds that existing business systems are designed for efficiency. And so we need to reflect at this point if we are creating value that would be able to transform business and make it more sustainable and competitive in market, or if we are just making incremental improvements. So new ideas tend to be incremental if the basis thereof is from established systems and traditional ways of thinking. They become more predictable and easy for competition to emulate. Therefore, they will be viable, but not really innovative. Weaker issues are different because traditional processes can't resolve them, especially now that we're living in the time of VUCA, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, as well as ambiguity, which designers love, by the way. Designers find comfort in that liquid state. And that doesn't always align to the traditional approach to solving business problems. We've traditionally looked to have problems that would be predictable in how we solve them. And so to create new worlds requires a framework with conditions under which any individual could contribute his or her skills together with freedom, creativity, speed, and a corporate culture to underpin all of that and connect people on a team. Let's move on to the next slide. Now we'll look at the design thinking process. It's a 5-step process. And as I mentioned earlier, design thinking is an exploratory process, and the nature of which is iterative and non-linear. It's quite dynamic, as a matter of fact. And as you will see on this process model here, the curves around the circle indicate that it is iterative. From his extensive work as a consultant with the Fortune 100, such as Microsoft and Procter and Gamble, Tim Brown published a study titled, "We Should Design Business Circles and Not Straight Lines." So gone are the days where we could be predictive about how the market would actually respond to our solutions. The build it and they'll come and get it approach no longer applies. We need to co-create value, not only with our stakeholders, but also, and most critically so, with our customers and users. All right, enough about the man team. He's not paying me to punt his name and his work. But once in a while in your life, you come across such a thinker who shifts your way of thinking so drastically that you have to appreciate them. As shown in my profile, I was a process engineer. And I think given my music background as well as marketing, I've always looked to add value. And so even as I was working as a process engineer, I always looked for opportunities to identify those innovative solutions that we could put in customers' hands and improve their lives, because that's what design thinking is about. It starts first with the customer. And as you will see in this process, in the empathize phase, that's where we conduct the research and understand the user's needs. We understand the customer's story. And you can think of story as an acronym. The S, which stands for the customer struggles. We need to understand what pain points they are dealing with, what friction points, even in their journey, that they have to contend with. The struggles. T is the transformation that they are looking to make. So what progress do customers want to make from their current set of struggles? And how can we help them in achieving that outcome? O is for the options. As you would have had defined in the jobs to be done framework, that customers don't really buy our products or services, but that they hire them to fulfill a need. And so O would refer to the options that customers would look to fulfill that need. And so as a brand, we would need to look at those options and what fulfillment or utility they offer the customer. R refers to the reservations that customers may have in buying your product or service. With that in mind, we are then able to come up with strategies to proactively handle those objections or reservations in the customer's mind. And we've learned that some of those the customer might not even be aware of. They might be emotional in nature or even social, especially in the era that we live in now of social media and the cancel culture. Customers worry about those kind of things, and we need to engineer those into our solution. And so my skills as a process engineer helped me realize that by spending just a bit more time with customers and walking a mile in their shoes, I could understand their struggles, their transformation aspirations, their options and reservations. And from that point, with my process engineering skills, work to not only design processes that drive efficiencies, but rather processes that deliver value in a time, place, on a platform that is preferred by customers. So rather make it more convenient for the customer than for the business. And the business will obviously gain the best out of that. And so define, I know you're still thinking about the why then story, I'll get to that. So define refers to how we then synthesize all of those insights that we would have collected as part of our empathize phase. And through that, reframe the problem. And so let's just think back to our SDLC process, where we would have sat with the business stakeholder to get the requirements and already start with designing and development work. And so you'll find that with design, those first 3 phases will be spent in the problem space. So design is quite passionate about understanding that problem space, because we understand that a problem well understood and defined is a problem half solved. I think it was Albert Einstein who said that if given 10 minutes to cut down a tree, they'll spend the first 8 minutes just sharpening the axe. Because once the problem is well defined, then everything else downstream is a lot more easier. And so we'll define that and reframe the problem, because we might have had some assumptions before we went out to empathize with the customers and get their inputs. But now coming back with those inputs, synthesizing those, we will then get to understand the problem from a customer's perspective, which will then help us reframe the problem in the define phase. And so once we have those insights, imaginative insights at that, we've got a gem to work with when we move on into the ideate phase. We often ask people to just ideate without that level of inspiration, which makes it quite difficult for them just to huddle together in a boardroom and try to come up with ideas of how we're going to solve customer problems. But the critical part is just to hear it first from the customer, and that will ignite imaginative insights that will let those creative juices flowing. And so with ideation, we will then generate many ideas, prioritize them based on the why of that story. Remember that? So coming back to the why refers to you as a company, as a brand. Out of those ideas that you've generated, what capabilities do you have internally? And what competencies do you have to make those ideas a reality? If we look back to the Venn diagram, the human-centered Venn diagram, that will speak to the feasibility. So we would have dealt with the desirability and then on to the feasibility. Are we able to deliver the solution? And equally with that, we'll also look at how this will be of value, because it obviously needs to be of mutual benefit. How it will be of value to the business as well. Design thinking is much more about doing than thinking. And so in the prototype phase is where we start building prototypes, low-fi prototypes to quickly put in the customer's hand and get their feedback. It's iterative. We keep on going back to the customer with everything that we put out so we can get their validation and rework our solution. And so in the prototype phase, we would then use something as simple as a storyboard even, just to walk the customer through the envisioned journey and experiences and get their input if this is something that will really improve their lives. And once we land on that MVP, we can then build something that's of high fidelity to test with customers. And that's the test phase. And so the iteration goes as we go into implementation. And so that is the design thinking process. And now we bring back again the blast from the past. Has any of you been able to decipher the mystery icon? Any guesses? All right. Let's reveal who that is. He's probably going to kill me for this because I didn't advise him yet. But it's none other than Mr. Tsepo Machila, Your Excellency, the General himself. A round of applause, please, and for one of the best teachers and leaders. It was in 2018 when we started this journey of trying to see how we merge the two disciplines together. And judging by the responses from multiple stakeholders across the different disciplines leading up to the session, myself, Zeki, and Deborah got to think that, okay, this thing should be maybe just much wider than just business analysis and design, because we've also got marketers. I mentioned Ian earlier on as well, who could also be joining us on the call, who's an agilist and a safe trainer. We have Scrum Masters. And with the case study that I will share with you now, you'll also learn that people from finance, legal, everyone is critical. Instead of just being a multidisciplinary team, design thinking advocates for an interdisciplinary team. So these are some of the design mindsets. This is a slide from the same workshop that myself and Tsepo ran at the BASA conference. It was put together by Tsepo, who captured this design mindset so succinctly and shared on some of their imperatives. So, yeah, if Tsepo is on the call, maybe he'll jump in later. I know he's continuing with his work of trying to evangelize more players in industry to design thinking in collaboration with business analysis. And so just looking at some of this mindsets, focus on people is where design thinking is about human-centered. So this has been captured both in the definition by Tim Brown and as well as in that Venn diagram where we look at desirability, in the process where we look at empathy as a phase. Show, don't tell, this phase around prototyping and testing. But most critically, it's about how you share every output with your stakeholders, so you also help them to empathize and walk the journey with you, because we found that most of the stakeholders, especially in business, may not be as exposed to the design process. Be action-oriented, be process-aware, collaborate radically, and defining problems clearly. It also thrives on experimentation. And I'll discuss this mindsets on the next slide. So in this tumultuous era, where the seas are raging, this basically just sends me back to 2018. I think we were in COVID already. I was still at IQ Business. Shout out to IQ Business. I see that they are also sponsor of this event. Myself and Tsepo Zeki met there as well. So shout out if you want work for one of the best consultants. Definitely do check them out. So just looking at the case study, right? So I was called upon then to help one of the banks to look at how they could repurpose their real estate assets, because everyone was working from home now. And this is something that was quite wicked, because we didn't know if a vaccine will be found in the next couple of months or so. And this was now in 2019. What do you do? Are we going to go back to normal, anytime soon? And so this is where we applied the design thinking process and started off by just being process aware. We empathized with our stakeholders, not just the end user or the customer, but we looked at our internal stakeholders to try and help them understand how design thinking could help them get to a solution, and outline the process for them. And so this was critical to really get their buy-in. We then went on to focus on people, and this applied for both employees as well as our business stakeholders as well. So design thinking, as mentioned earlier, is about humans. So we focused on their outcomes. If you think back to the story, what were our stakeholders struggling with? What were some of those wicked problems? What were our employees as the beneficiaries of the solution that we were trying to work on? What were their struggles as well as aspirations? So we empathized with them. And what was key with this process is that I had by my side a member of the IBA South Africa chapter as well. Another member, won't mention her name yet. She will speak up if she's comfortable to do so. And she was a business analyst, right? And we worked through the process together where we conducted interviews with employees at different levels of the organization. And as we came together to empathize, we would then play back the findings to the broader team with the stakeholders, just to always give them sight of the process, because it's quite exploratory, and the stakeholders were not quite sure where this was leading them to. So to show and don't tell was quite critical. So as often as we could, we would build and visualize outputs from customers, being the employees in this case, to help inspire our stakeholders to this design process. And once we had been through understanding that problem space, having dissected it, we don't got down with everyone to defining the problems clearly. So we critically analyzed and articulated the problem space, which then started giving everyone some sense of comfort. Another mindset is around how we collaborated radically. Then we brought in SMEs from engineering, HR, finance, real estate, with a supportive Scrum Master by our side to thresh out what solutions could look like. And these solutions were then prioritized and adopted, and now have created real value some 3 years later. Millions of rents in savings and some rental income. The process was quite agile, where we collaborated, but had to make sure to apply this mindset to keep the stakeholder as part of the process as well. And so this is one case study where it worked quite well. Dumelo might be on the call as well. We applied the same approach to insurance product as well. And so we'll look at this slide that Tsepo brought up at our 2018 BASA workshop, where it looks at this predilection gap between business analysis and design thinking. We looked at Dr. Roger Martin's work on this predilection gap to really understand where we could integrate the practices. Despite their differences, both design thinking and business analysis tools, they share a common goal, and that is to enhance problem solving and decision-making processes. Both approaches seek to understand user needs and requirements to drive the development of successful products, services, or solutions. Integrating elements of both methodologies can lead to a comprehensive problem solving and solution development. And most of us have been in a safe and an agile environment. And so we should make the circle bigger and see how both approaches could then be incorporated as part of SAFE as well. And so you can see the distinct differences between the two. On the left-hand side, analytical thinking, and on the right-hand side, design thinking. The purpose there for analytical thinking is proved through induction and deduction, whereas on the design thinking side, it's knowing without reasoning, which really makes business stakeholders and managers panic. The approach for analytical thinking is exploitation of current knowledge, whereas design thinking is just through exploration of new knowledge. Focusing on data from the past, on the analytical thinking side, and focus on what might be. There's just one other mindset of design that I appreciate so much, and that is called creative confidence. So I don't know if it's because I have a creative bone, given my background in music, in marketing, and my innovation pursuits. But focusing on what might be, invention of the future, and suppression of the analysis comes easy to me. But I've got to understand that that's not how everyone else is wired, because analysis doesn't come as easy. And I mean, I've had these discussions. I remember when we were back at IQ Business with Zeki, where I was also just trying to give my left brain a hot clap and get it into analysis mode. And Zeki was struggling as well, I guess, with this right-hand side of the brain as well. And it was quite comforting having a chat with him earlier this week to learn that he'll be pursuing, studies. Sorry, Zeki, to announce if he had not made it, known to anyone as yet. But that they'll be taking up user experience studies, which I think should be pretty much for everyone. And that is to future-proof ourselves, especially with the machine taking over as it's doing, as you'll see now in the next slide, with the help of Deborah. So the goal on the design thinking side is just validity. It's an iterative process. We show and don't tell, take whatever output that we possibly can to the customer, test with them, and iterate from there to validate the effectiveness of the solution. And on the left side, you have reliability and pretty much predictability. So as a process engineer, previously when ChatGPT helped us with this juxtaposition of design thinking and process thinking, I could immediately understand and see the differences. But the two are separately quite critical at different stages in the process, even to that of design and business analysis as well. And hence, we're trying to look at how we could match the two. So where is the magic? All right, so I spoke at length about the design thinking process as well as the business analysis process. If we look to the left, that's what Tsepo used to refer to as the fuzzy front end of innovation, is where design would mostly play, where we come in, understand the needs, the customer story, reframe the problem or define the problem. And once that is understood, we'll discover what solutions we can take forward through ideation. And through ideation, we then prototype and scale down to the most feasible solution, but not only feasible only because that's the capability that we have internally in the organization, but that it should be desirable as well for the humans that we are creating the solutions for, and equally viable for the business that we are running. So it should be sustainable. We would then evaluate that. And right there at the center where you then start with analysis, you could pretty much say that's where business analysis comes in strong. And so this is a process known as the double diamond in design thinking. The first part of it, that statement, or where it branches out, is what we call divergent thinking, where we're quite broad in our thinking and how we approach problems. And then the second part of the diamond is where we then converge and prioritize and test and validate and settle on an MVP that could help us take the solution to market. A business analyst would then also analyze in that second part of the double diamond from the vast amount of data. They would then build and then test the solution. And so it's not that you keep the two practices separate from each other, but as I highlighted in our case study with my fellow business analyst, we were with each other throughout each step of the way. From the design side of things, where we empathized with the customer and understood, because that then helped her to write user stories from a customer perspective. User stories with a bit more human and emotion in them. Because she could obviously reflect back on some of the conversations that we were having with the users and could bring that into the software solutions. Similarly with the design team members as well, they would ensure on the second half of the double diamond that all those experience and signature experiences at that magic moments are carried over into the solution and are integrated as the final solution that will be taken to market, because that is what will distinguish us from competitors. And then the final output will then be shipped out to market. Yeah, I mean, I guess at this point we can hear what some of the some of your views are. But the design principles is basically help to keep important values front and center in the design process. And when successfully composed and used, design principles, they ensure consistency in decision-making across designers and teams. So we encourage you to explore different principles from a design and VA, as well as agile frameworks, and let's see how we can work together to really find that spark at the intersection of the different disciplines and future-proof ourselves against the machines. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sipho. That was a really insightful one. And thank you for the case study. I think that did a lot, in just giving us context and helping us to understand the value as you have applied it, in your context, and how we can extend all that you have been teaching us about tonight into our context. We really, really appreciate you. I think we have some questions in the Q&A. Zeki, would you like to take the questions? Please, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you. Otherwise, just put your questions in the Q&A and then we'll take the questions from there, and we'll just make sure that Sipho answers all the questions that you might have.
Thank you, Deborah. So thanks, Sipho, for that great presentation. I've learned a lot today about design thinking and how design approaches the problem. So I think we have a question from Liana. She's asking, you mentioned consulting with stakeholders. When and how does a bank consult with their clients? Which client will typically be approached for input?
Thank you for that question, Liana. I mean, that's a great one. And so it depends on the nature of the project and the trigger thereof. And so in our team, and because we've evangelized design across the organization, our business stakeholders know to look to us for ideas. So they don't sit by themselves in a boardroom and try and come up with requirements or how we'll actually leverage an opportunity that they've identified in the market. And an example of that would be with the buy now, pay later sort of solution. So one of the EXCO members, saw how it was taking off in other markets, in Australia, in the States and so forth. And there wasn't much presence of it in the African economic landscape. And so knowing our approach with empathizing and defining and exploring if there's really an opportunity for such a solution in this market, he then just sent it on to us as a design challenge, right? So the approach is different because they've come to know us as people that actually go out to the market, empathize with customers, identify if there is appetite for this kind of solution in the market. And once we have gathered data and insights on all those different data points, we could then triangulate and put it in a report back to the EXCO member with the recommendations of, whether or not it should be taken to market. And so where we've given a green light, we would then set up a design team to basically do feasibility study. What we have codified in our process is basically a 3-step process, which we've socialized at the highest echelons of the organization, where we will first look at the problem solution fit. And so before a solution could be adopted and we can start with anything else, we first need to prove for fit. Is the problem that we are trying to solve compatible with the solution and our capabilities for meeting that? And so there's a list of artifacts and outputs that we would produce to show that fit. It would then get to a stage gate where it would get approved based on a set of activities having been conducted to ensure that, yes, indeed, there is a problem. And yes, indeed, this is the solution that we could look at solving that problem. And so you could think of it as those first 3 stages of design thinking, where we would have empathized, we would have defined the problem space, as well as ideated and whittled it down to the most feasible ideas that we could work with. And so the second phase would then be to test for product market fit. And so we would go into designing high fidelity prototypes to test with the market. So here's the product. Is the market open to it? Is there traction that we could make in market? And so the numbers will speak for themselves from all the different tests that we will run. And once product market fit is approved, we can then go into commercialization. And so there's a number of angles, even from a business perspective, that we look at as well. It's not just the product. When we talk about viability from a business perspective, because we would have looked at feasibility, now viability is how we organize ourselves in terms of our delivery, how we create and capture value as well. So if you think of the business model canvas, so you need to think of it from a market perspective as well. How do we interact with these customers, on the right-hand side of the business model canvas? On what channels? How do we engage them? What is the most plausible CVP as far as the solution is concerned? And who do we partner with in delivering the solution in market? That would be on the left-hand side of the business model canvas, where we look at what key activities to conduct, what sort of resources we would need. And from a business perspective, obviously on the balance sheet, that would also, on our business case, would also have to make sense, where we stack up our costs against our revenue streams as well. And so once that is done as part of the product market fit, we then go to a commercial fit, where branding, marketing comes in, and obviously there would be matrix worked into that to monitor the success of the product in market as well. But as it is quite inherent to design, we'll continually iterate and drop and ship more features as we learn more about the market. So that's sort of one way of going about it. But similarly to this case study that I gave, I mean, pre-COVID, before we went into lockdown, this real estate department had already developed a set of requirements, with the business analysts and so forth. And then suddenly this change happened. VUCA happened. There was uncertainty, volatility, and so forth. And so those plans could never work anymore. They needed a design way to go about exploring what we're facing. And so design is more futuristic in its approach. It looks at creating new worlds. As nervous as they might have been, and we understood that because we not only empathize with our end customers or users, but we empathize as well with our stakeholders, and we needed to give them some level of comfort. So some of those mindsets, show, don't tell, collaborative, radically, kept them quite close to that work. And we could assure them some level of certainty that in the next 2 months or so, we could give them what we call a pitch deck that would help them make an informed decision based on validated customer data, research, as well as some of the user inputs as well from the testing that we would have run. So at that point, it makes it much easier for them to make a decision to either go ahead with the solution or not. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's just we engage differently to how they would engage with business analysts. Well, from sort of my previous days as a process engineer, you would have a business come to you and say, hey, I need you to just redesign this process for this outcome, and that's what we would do. We would analyze, but it was much more efficiency driven. But with us, they pretty much don't know what they don't know, and maybe we should start teaching them some more.
Thanks, people, for that answer. We have a couple of questions, so I'll just try to go through them as quickly as possible. I think the second one, people, is the one that we talked at length, right? Does every design thinker needs to be a BA as well, and vice versa, ILS, IIBA, Slovenia. So I think we chatted at length with this one. Take it away, people.
You want to give it a shot? What was your answer to that?
No, you're the expert.
Yeah, no, certainly. I mean, I've because I'm in the top funnel strategy side of design, where we look at customer experience and service design, and understanding those attributes of the story, right? And further down the design funnel, you get your UX and UI design, who are a lot more analytical actually in their approach. And then you get, obviously your front-end developers and there's guys that do copy and so forth. And so you can really slot yourself in at any point, but I do think that, BAs are well positioned to come into that design role. I mean, when I worked with Tsepo, he was already doing, wireframes and, all those sort of things, which I had never done as a process engineer. So already had somehow, as a set of your BA skills, some design awareness. And so I think, it would be much easier for business analysts to transition into that role. And why we opened with the question that asked if, any of you would want to transition into the PO role, because now as a PO, you should understand what the people in your team are doing. So it is also good for a BA looking to go into a PO role to understand a bit more about design. And especially now, post-COVID, design is huge because digital has just grown so exponentially. And so I think it would only work to your advantage. And vice versa. I took some business analysis courses previously as well. I've had the BABOK at some point as my Bible, because there is value in being quite methodical in your approach. I could have just gone through that whole fuzzy, uncertain design phase. But once I've kind of converged and got to the solution, I had then to be methodical about landing that solution in market, and making sure that everything works according to plan. So I would say, yes, vice versa, there is definitely room for that.
Thanks, Sipho. Yeah, no, I echo that sentiment, definitely. I think in my experience, just to echo that, I found that solving problems with a customer in mind and doing wireframes makes it easier for people to understand in terms of what solution you're trying to strive for. So it brings everyone together to try and solution for a better solution, right? I think the next question is Adriette. How do we approach design thinking in a space where most of the initiatives and capabilities will stretch across several divisions? Alignment of goals is often the challenge in design approach. This is a good one.
Let me see the question. Can you say that again?
Yeah, so Adriette says, is asking, how do we approach design thinking in a space where most of the initiatives and capabilities will stretch across several divisions, i.e. marketing, IT, and so forth, right? Alignment of goals obviously is often a challenge in design approach. So how do you align it across and sort of like have one goal at mind, especially in big organizations? Yeah.
Yes, so I mean, luckily in our organization, customer experience is driven from ExCo level. All right, so we even have what we call human-centered leadership. So human-centered design and customer experience, creating experiences, just it's engraved in our culture. And we work quite closely with our marketing colleagues as well, because in marketing, and as you would know, Zeki, I was at, talking at Melrose this past Tuesday with some of the marketers in the industry. And we are quite aligned because, I mean, I also have a marketing qualification, but what marketing communicates in their messaging in market, in what they call the brand experience, needs to be articulated as well onto our platforms in the user experience, as well as in our interactions, in the customer experience. So we need to have that golden thread, through from the messaging in market from a branding perspective and marketing perspective, working into our journey maps from a customer experience perspective, and what we build on a piece of glass as well, just from an experience perspective. Are we doing emotional design to incorporate some of those elements in market? And so the why, because if you go into discuss this as different functions and practices, you're really not going to get onto the same page. But strategy should be the one then that drives your collaboration. So if you look at our purpose at Nedbank is that we are financial experts who do good for our customers, the communities we operate in, and businesses. And so we would always look back to that. And of course, there are OKRs and objectives linked to that. And so if the solution aligns to those strategic objectives, everyone else has no option but to really support that. But we also have a group-wide framework that incorporates design. So those 3 phases that I made reference to, being problem solution fit, product market fit, commercial fit, you won't get past a checkpoint, that stage gate, if you haven't satisfied certain requirements and artifacts. So we've made sure to codify it into the culture of the organization, and really do design, as a way of working. And we've been quite strict about saying that customer experience is not a function, but everyone's responsibility. And so everyone is basically in customer experience, work, because that's what we need to deliver for our customer. That's one of our values as an organization as well. So yeah, it would have to be driven obviously by your strategic objectives and your North Star as part of that particular project. Not sure if that
Thanks,
covers it.
Sipho.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks, man. Yeah, so I think we just left with 2 minutes in terms of answering the questions. I think we have a follow-up question by Liana. I think that will be the last one to take before I hand over back to Deborah, right? It says here, follow-up, what would be typical sample size referring to consulting with the client? I think it's referring to that first question, right? That you mentioned consulting with stakeholders. When and how does a bank consult with their clients? Which client will typically be approached for inputs, right?
Yeah, maybe Rihanna wants to come on mic to elaborate.
Yeah, just to elaborate that. Yeah,
I think she means sort of your end users, right? So when we conduct research, you need to obviously do that with customers or your users. And so it depends on the type of research. If it's user testing, we could do it with 5, sort of customers, but we will choose them quite carefully. I mean, would they be from that segment? Would have their profile, but just basically to test with them, be it A/B testing or just usability testing, but just to see if they resonate with the product, with the solution, and that we've incorporated some of those design or UI principles on the platform. Is it flexible to use? Is it clear? Is the visual hierarchy understandable? Does it aid in ease of navigation? Can they get what they want quick and fast on the platform? And we know about the 8-second rule with the Gen Z especially. So flexibility then refers to being able to fulfill those Gen Z needs, whilst also accommodating the boomers, right? So the Gen Z should find their shortcuts to get around to the outcome, whereas the boomers should also have the freedom to go at it at their own pace, and so forth. And so what tends to happen is that after the 5th user, you get what I call sort of diminishing returns. The graph just sort of plateaus, because then you start getting the same insights, right? If it's a survey, that you could obviously, you have the numbers, it's quantitative in nature and not as qualitative, that you can run with anything from a 500 to 1,000. It depends on the market size, as well. In retail, you'd be looking at a lot more numbers than you would in heuristics or corporate and business. So, yeah, that's one. And then, yeah, you have qualitative research surveys. We could just do observations. We could just, go into the customer's natural environment, just to observe how they interact with certain options. Remember the Owen story and solutions, and identify gaps in there. And so ethnographic research is what we would do in customer experience, where we immerse ourselves in the customer space, and that's part of empathizing. So we understand what are some of the challenges that they face, and that then provides the insights that we need to ideate effectively and just create super products.
Thank you very much, Tipo. Thanks. Hope it answered that question. Okay, cool. I think we have come to the end of the questions. I'll hand over back to Deborah. Deborah?
Thank you so much, Sipho, for the insightful presentation. We really, really appreciate you for your presence, for your patience, and just making sure that you demystify every concept and bring it to life through case studies and examples, and taking your time to answer all the questions that were raised. We really, really appreciate you, and we look forward to further collaboration with you in the future. We want to thank all the members of IIBA SA Durban. We want to thank you for all the plans that you've put together to make this a success. We want to specifically say thank you to Zeki, you know, for just making this come together beautifully, for all the, you know, endless Friday meetings, you know, to just make sure that this becomes a success. We really appreciate you, Zeki. I want to thank everyone, our team. Lihana is also there. Thank you so much for making this a possibility. We also want to thank all our invited guests. Thank you so much for putting your time and possibly money, you know, believing in us and, you know, gifting us your presence. We appreciate you. We hope that, you know, you continue to come around and let us learn. Let's get better as the world of IT continues to be turbulent, that we can just come together, collaborate, and create value through our collaboration. Please don't forget, if you want to join IIBA SA, we put the link in the chat. Remember to join us. There are a lot of perks that you'll get to enjoy from joining the community. Also, please don't forget, we have IIBA Summit, our yearly summit. We have it coming up in October. Please look forward to announcement on LinkedIn and on all our social media. It's a once in a year event, and it's the BA event of the year. You don't want to miss it. I'm very, very sure that this year is going to be an amazing one too. I want to thank IIBA, you know, South Africa. We want to thank Tepo, and all the big guys in Johannesburg. Thank you so much for always supporting us in every way that you do, for putting our marketing materials together. We appreciate you all. We hope that you have a beautiful night, and see you when we see you next, when we put together another program to just make sure that we keep on being of value to our organizations. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you for coming. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.